Hello, everyone out there. Welcome to video 25. This video is entitled Chomsky's Shocking View. Language is not primarily for communication. Let's imagine that after all these years that you've been encouraging and also sharing as an argument that the main idea of learning a language is to communicate, to use it in real context, what if that's not 100% sure or true? Let's see, okay? So today's main competency, let's have a look at that, is today's main competence is that by the end of the video, you will be able to critically explain Chomsky's claim that language is primarily a computational system for thought rather than communication, distinguish between the internal computational system and externalization, and reflect on the implication of these ideas for language teaching. I would like to share this quotation, which is very, very profound, and it's the learning process does not make the mind more complex. Learning is the result of a complex mind. So most of the time we believed that learning can eventually help learners to become more intelligent, but the reality shows, and this is a quotation from 2019, that the fact that your mind is complex, that is what really allows you to learn, in this case, a language. So it would be the other way around, okay? So, hello everyone again, and welcome to the channel. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are going to explore one of the most provocative and perhaps the most misunderstood claims ever made by who is considered the contemporary father and practitioner in linguistics, Noam Chomsky, Professor Noam Chomsky. So he once said, language is not primarily for communication. And if that wasn't controversial enough, he also suggested that second language teachers teach, or what we teach, is largely made up of the peripheral trivialities of language. Imagine hearing that after years of teaching grammar, pronunciation, vocabulary, communication skills. Imagine hearing that. Imagine hearing that what you do is just a triviality, something trivial uh, that is um, in the periphery of what should be considered as language. Was Chomsky dismissing language teaching? Was he saying communicative language teaching is wrong? Or is there something much deeper behind these statements? Today we'll unpack exactly what he meant and discuss what this means for every English language teacher. So let's begin. What's the main problem here? Almost every language teaching methodology starts with one basic claim or assumption. Language exists to communicate. If you open almost any textbook, you'll find objectives such as communicating ideas, expressing opinions, negotiating meaning, or interacting successfully. Even the Common European Framework Reference describes language largely in terms of communicative competence. This perspective makes perfect sense. After all, we speak, we write, we listen, and we eventually communicate. But Noam Chomsky asked a completely different question. Not what do people do with language? Instead, he asks, why does the human mind possess language at all? Why do we human beings have language? Notice the difference. The first one is an educational question. What do people do with language? And the second is a biological question. Why does the human mind possess language at all? That distinction changes everything, the whole scenario. Why language is not primarily for communication? According to Chomsky, language evolved primarily as a computational system inside the human mind. Remember that Noam Chomsky belongs to the biolinguistic perspective, the cognitive perspective. So, according to him, language evolved primarily as a computational system that allowed us not to communicate, but to create thoughts. And that's the key fact. Think about your own day. And this makes total sense. How many conversations have you had inside your own head? Planning tomorrow, remembering yesterday, imagining future situations, making decisions, solving problems. Most language never leaves our minds. It becomes speech when we communicate, and then we communicate. That's the last stage. Therefore, it's only one possible use of language. Communication is only one possible use of language, not the only use of language. The real engine It's in your head, and it's your capacity to generate thoughts. You can generate thoughts because you have this computational system called language that allows you to. And he shares a very important fact. This was taken from Noam Chomsky, Walks into a Bar from 2013. Probably 99.9% of the use of language is internal. You can go through your whole day, if you like, without saying a word. You are talking to yourself all the time. He also, in this interesting text and this interview, he also says, if you look around, you notice that people interact and they just talk about trivial things. Where, how are you today? Where are you from? They are not really sharing complex thoughts or ideas, but we use language for the sake of communicating, but basic things, really, according to Noam Chomsky. So, what is this computational system? This is where Chomsky theory becomes fascinating. He proposes that every human possesses an internal language faculty, sometimes called I language or internal language. This system allows us to combine concepts, create hierarchies, produce infinite number of sentences, many sentences based on some patterns, and understand expressions that we've never heard before, either in a first language or a second language. Children don't memorize these principles, they naturally develop them. It's internal system, it's biological. Now, what is externalization? Now, imagine you have a brilliant idea. That idea remains inside your mind until you decide to express it once you consider that it's a logical idea. The moment you speak, the moment you write, the moment you sign, your internal computation now becomes external. This is what Chomsky calls externalization. Externalization includes sounds, pronunciation, vocabulary, word order, verb sentence, articles, writing system, and even accents. And if it is a second language, even errors. Different language externalized through thought differently. Okay, so different languages externalize thoughts or ideas differently. English says I've been working. Spanish says he estado trabajando. Japanese expresses the same idea differently. The external forms vary. The underlying computational capacity remains. So this is a difference between internalization, your I language, okay, ideas, plans, memories, reasoning, imagination, self-talk, problem solving. Internal language includes thinking, planning, imagining, reasoning, remembering, self-talk. In contrast, externalization, language as communication, I think we should meet tomorrow. External use of language, speaking, writing, signing, producing addresses. A small part of language is externalized as speech, writing or signs, utterances. Most use of language is internal. It is a computational system for thoughts. Even when you are interacting with others, you are still thinking with language and thinking different ideas, not necessarily what people are talking about. Why is this claim often misunderstood? Many teachers interpreted his word as an attack on language teaching, but that wasn't his point. Imagine a computer. One scientist studies the operating system, another studies the keyboard. Both are studying the same computer, but at different levels. Chomsky studies the operating system. Teachers often work with the keyboard. Neither perspective is wrong, they simply answer different questions. Now, this becomes fascinating when it comes to helping people learn a language. Okay, we cannot focus only on the keyboards. So, this is the EFL reflection. So, what does this mean for English teachers? Quite a lot. Perhaps language teaching isn't only about producing correct sentences. Maybe our role also involves helping learners develop new conceptual systems, new patterns, and new ways of organizing thought. Language learning becomes more than communication, it becomes cognitive development. Okay, so classroom practices, how can you achieve this in your classroom, in your context, in real scenarios? Here I will be sharing with you 5 practical implications. Practice number 1, teach patterns rather than isolated rules. Help learners discover relationships instead of memorizing them. Encourage noticing the rules. Practice 2, value silent thinking. Not every activity requires immediate speaking. Reflection is learning. Okay? Internal processing matters. Another important practice in your classroom that you can, of course, implement, ask conceptual questions. Instead of what tense is this, try asking what meaning does this tense create? Students begin thinking like linguists in a very simple question. Practice 4, treat errors as evidence. Errors reveal the developing internal grammar and they show hypotheses in progress. Practice 5, balance communication with reflection. Communication remains essential, but there are other important tools. Noticing, thinking, comparing, hypothesizing are equally important. So, if you're a researcher and if you're interested in Chomsky's claims, I'd like to leave you with several questions. If language evolved primarily for thought, should our classroom include more opportunities for silent reflection? Can communication alone explain grammar? Or do learners construct internal grammatical systems independently? Should grammar instruction emphasize conceptual understanding rather than memorization? Does explicit instruction actually modify internal representations or simply improve performance? Finally, what exactly develops when learners acquire another language, communication, or a new cognitive system? It's an interesting question. Perhaps Chomsky's most controversial statement has also been his most misunderstood. He never denied that language communicates. Okay, of course it does. Instead, he challenged us to think about why language exists in the first place. His answer was simple: language first creates thought, communication comes afterward. Whether you agree with him or not, his ideas continue challenging linguists, psychologists, neuroscientists, scientists, and language teachers all around the world. So I had the opportunity to email Noam Chomsky, Professor Noam Chomsky, asking him whether or not he thought that there was a critical period in second language learning. This was his answer. There is research on whether there are critical periods for language acquisition, relying on universal grammar. It seems to be true, but not overwhelming, not 100% convincing. Adult language learners can gain very high competence even if there remain traces of lack of grasp of some subtleties. It means there are some issues, okay, but they can become very competent. But there is not a definite answer about the critical period, in which I will be talking about this in the next topics. But I have the honor to get an answer from him. Okay, when I started my PhD studies, I emailed him because I had a tentative idea of whether or not we were wasting our time aiming at helping students to become real proficient learners. Believing, again, considering the language was as an operating system, not for communication. So that's why the definition for success is crucial. If your definition of success when it comes to language teaching or learning has to do with having students communicate with others and they can eventually do it, then you are doing your job. If your own definition for language learning has to do with a much more complex aspect that has to do with making the students think, relay patterns, and develop this new cognitive system, then your task would be more challenging and you will require more techniques. These are the references that I've used in this video. And of course, if you've liked it, I invite you to subscribe and join the upcoming live session soon. Okay, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video, in which we will be talking about the update, the state of the art related to the critical period hypothesis and the most fossilized English phrases and chunks in EFL context. Thank you very much. Bye.